Good morning, world. Welcome to Wildwood Farm. Here I am back out in my milking room on a very hot and muggy Thursday morning, August 10th. Yes, today is August 10th. We are here on our off-grid farm that we use to feed our own family and to provide our community with very good fresh products, be it meat, milk, or eggs from our own animals that we have raised here that are making a ruckus out there. Of course, everybody's got to see what I'm doing when I come out to the barn because, I am the bucket lady. Okay, so today's subject in our Going Off Grid playlist is the next most important non-negotiable variable, water. Okay, the last video we discussed land. Okay, the decision of where you're going to live is going to have a very big impact on the ease of having water for your farm or homestead. Now, first of all, a couple of facts. You can only go 3-4 days at the most without any water, without dying. So water is a need, not just something that would be nice to have. You have to have water. The availability and the amount of water varies by your location. Of course, logic says in the desert, you're not going to have very much rainfall. We moved to a place in South Dakota several years ago from Louisiana, and that was definitely a change in water availability for us. We moved to South Dakota and we found out the entire amount of rain for the year, and that included snowfall, entire amount of precipitation, let's rephrase that, for the year in the area that we lived in South Dakota was 16 inches. Okay, now that just sounds like a lot until you think about that's over the entire year. So I'm terrible with math, so I'm not going to sit here and break it down. But there's 12 months in a year, okay? So if that is spread evenly over the year, 16 inches over a year is maybe an inch or two a month. Okay, not even an inch and a little bit every month. That's about this much rain. It's not a whole lot of rain. Okay, we moved from Louisiana where we would get a couple of feet of rain a month. Okay, so there's a vast difference. So, water. First of all, you can't change the climate. So what your rainfall and precipitation is going to be, and the ability of finding groundwater above ground and in the ground is unchangeable. Now, you can change your ability to get it. If you have the money and the ability to do it, the equipment, you can port water, which means going to, in South Dakota, which we realized, there were locations that you could go to, and for a quarter or so, you would put some quarters in a machine. It was basically like a vending machine, and the hose would pull on. If I remember right, now this was back in 2008, if I'm remembering correctly, or 7, we would toss 50 cents in and we could get 400 gallons of water. That's not bad, really. But we also had to have the trailer and the tank to be able to catch that amount of water. And the car or vehicle to pull it. Okay, so that's one option. You could also go to, like we did when we moved here in Arkansas, to state parks. Some state parks will allow you to fill up containers of any sort. Down here we use IBC totes, those big 275 to 300 gallon square in the wire cage totes to port water. Lots of people use those for their hunting camps here. So some state parks will allow you to fill up those totes. The amount that they're going to charge you varies. Okay, it just depends on the park. Also, you could have water delivered. In some locations, they have companies that will port water to your home. Again, you will have to have the infrastructure to be able to contain that water. Now, if you have the money to do it and you want to, you can put in a well. In some locations, your well may be thousands of feet deep and require a lot of equipment to maintain and pump the water. Now, here in Arkansas, we can put in a well and we can hit water at less than 25 feet. So with that, it would be simple. A well that's 25 feet deep is easy. That's considered a shallow well. If you have the energy and the guts, you can hand dig one of those. There's various ways you can hand dig a well. You can hand dig the well, or you can drive it. There's companies that will drive a well. That it's going to cost money. It costs so much per foot. And then it costs so much for the equipment and the pipes and everything, the casing, to put the well in. You can also jet them yourself with water, but hence you will have to have a supply of water and the equipment to jet the well. You can pound a pole in the ground, a pipe, not a pole, a pipe into the ground with equipment. So there are ways that you could do it yourself to put a shallow well in. And then to get that water out, depending on the width of the hole in the ground, you can either do it the old-fashioned way, like Jack and Jill, and drop a bucket down in that well and pull it up. That works great because there's absolutely minimal moving parts, a pulley, a rope, and a bucket. Very little to break and very inexpensive to replace. You can also get an old-fashioned pitcher pump. I have one of those, and I cannot wait to install that thing. It works. For anything less than 25 feet, you can put a hand pump on it and pump up the water. Anything over 25 feet, you can't do that. You can also get small pumps that run off of solar that can pump your water out off of a battery. There are a lot of solar pumps that can do shallow wells. When you have a well that's anything deeper than 25 feet and what is considered a medium or deep well, you're going to need bigger equipment and a lot more horsepower to pull that water up because it takes a lot of energy to pull water up. Water is very heavy. It basically, per gallon, weighs 8 pounds. So think about it. If you're pulling up a 5-gallon bucket of water out of a well, you're pulling up 8 times 5 is 40 pounds of weight. How deep is that well going to be? How strong is the equipment? And to do it with a machine, it takes a lot of power to do that. So you would have to figure out whether or not you had the money to encompass it. So there, water makes a big difference. The next thing that you have to consider is okay, so you have a water supply. How permanent is it? Oh, wait, I missed one. Water catchment. That is what we're working off of right now. Water catchment is when you put out a cistern. It can consist of a 5-gallon bucket off of your eaves. Hey, Silver, quit kicking the door. Sorry about that. It could consist of 5-gallon buckets lined up off their eaves of your house. Or you could put up a gutter array and piping and a filter system and have it pipe into however many totes or containers that you wish to. Now, when you have a cistern like that, you have to consider filtration. Well, first of all, you have to consider where the rain is falling in the first place. What kind of roof is it falling on? Okay. You're going to have to consider if it's a tin roof, how clean is your tin roof? If you're way out in the boondocks, you're not going to have too much dirt on it or bird poop or anything. But if you have a shingle roof, be it wood shingles or asphalt shingles, you're going to have grit and things that catch in that. So a tin roof would be ideal to be catching water off of if you're going to be catching it off of a building. Now, if you have a shingled roof with asphalt or wooden shingles, you're going to have to install or have some sort of way to filter out the heavier than water grit. So what normally people do, and what we did on our cistern system, is we had a long drop pipe. It drops down all the way to the ground. But where the water comes out is about 3 foot off the ground and then goes into the totes. So all the heavier than water sediment sinks to the bottom of the 3 foot below the outflow and settles out there, and clean water or cleaner water flows into our tanks. The next thing that you have to consider is how sealed are your tanks. Are they all open totally on the top, or is it just a small hole for the pipe and water to flow into? If it's totally open on the top, I would suggest you screen it in some way, shape, or form to keep out frogs, because they will love your toads. They sound great, but they breed like mad in your toads, and you really don't want to be drinking tadpoles. Mosquitoes will get in your toads constantly, no matter how small your hole is. So you need, the smaller the better, it'll limit it. But you need to make some way to screen out the bugs. Also, you need to think about where your totes are located at. Are they going to be in the direct sun? If they're in the direct sun, the water's going to heat up, first of all, which is nasty. Hot water does not taste good unless it's got coffee in it. It's going to get algae and mold. Well, not mold, but algae and growth in the tanks. Okay, so you need to consider sheltering your tanks. Also, that's the summertime. What about in the winter? How cold is it going to get in your winter? Are your cisterns going to get frozen? I mean, a 300-gallon ice cube is pretty cool, but it sucks when all your pipes break and you have to replace everything in the spring. And for a couple of months, until things thaw out, you're stuck with no water again. Okay, that's another thought. But for the catchments, then after, okay, let's go back to the system. So now you have them in the totes, and you have your totes covered and protected from the elements and bugs and random kitty cats deciding that they want to go swimming and not making it out of the thing, or any other little critters. You don't want to have floaters in there. It will contaminate your entire water supply. You need to consider decontaminating your water supply, because there are things in the air, pathogens that float in the air. Okay, stuff that's in raindrops that fall in your water. Raindrops are not totally sterile. So you need to have some sort of filtration system if you're planning on using this water that you caught from the rain to keep your water relatively pure and safe for drinking purposes. There are many ways you can filter water. There's Berkeley's. You can take it out of the tote and pour it into a Berkeley and let it filter through the Berkeley. You can set up an inline filtration system that consists of a carbon filter and other kinds of little filters in there, similar like what you use on a pool, or what you use in a regular house's sink to filter city water, to filter it. You can go super, super basic and get sand, like pool sand, the fine, really fine white sand, charcoal, smashed up really fine, and make several layers of that, and a filter cloth, a piece of cloth at the bottom, and pour your water through that. Super basic. You can do that in a 5-gallon bucket. Pour your water through that, and then put it into a separate container inside the house for drinking purposes. Now, for basically watering your livestock or watering your gardens, straight rainwater would be perfectly fine. I mean, shoot, dogs and horses and cows and pigs and all drink out of puddles. Okay, so they don't need super, super clean. They just don't need filthy water. Okay, rainwater would be fine for that. Plants live outside anyways, so rainwater is what they get constantly. So catching pure rainwater for your gardens and your plants and your animals is perfectly acceptable. You don't have to do any kind of filtration for that whatsoever. For washing dishes, washing your body, washing your clothes, I would suggest using a bleach to basically like you do in a pool. You don't want to do it as bad. You don't want that chlorine pool smell, swimming pool smell, but you can use pool shock, and you put, I'm thinking it's like a cup of bleach to one of those big 300 gallons of of totes to shock your pools. And that will kill most of the pathogens that are in the water and make it good for things that you're going to come in contact with, food or your clothing or your body. Okay. Now, for drinking purposes, of course, you're going to need better filtration systems than that. Okay. Unless you're brave and you say to hell with it and you just want to drink straight rainwater and you're out in the boondocks and there's no cities anywhere near you and your roof is relatively clean, you can give it a shot. You may get sick because our bodies are not used to germs, because we live in such a sterile society in cities now that everything is so sanitized that our bodies aren't used to the normal pathogens and bugs and germs and dirt of an off-grid lifestyle or on a farm or living in nature. So your first few times you may get a stomach bug if you just drink straight, clean rainwater with general filtration. So, but you can become accustomed to it. I can drink out of our cisterns, and we just throw the bleach in it, and I don't have any problems over it. Now, 5-6 years ago was a different story. But you can become accustomed to it. I don't suggest it, but that would be up to that's your choice. I'm not telling anybody how to do anything. I'm just giving suggestions. So now, those are the basic ways that you can acquire water. The next question. So, how much rain falls on your property? That can be found out by looking up online. Google's your friend. There are charts that show the general average rainfall in all the locations. You can also go to the local towns that you're planning on moving to and asking there and seeing if they don't have some kind of record. Or Googling maybe the records for that specific town that's online. Everything's got records somewhere, and you can get an idea. It won't be perfectly exact, but you can get an idea of what the rainfall has been for the last several years in that location. So you can get an idea what you're going to do. So now it's summertime's taken care of. You figured out how you're going to get your water. Okay, you figured out how you're going to get it. Back to the wells. How much is that well going to pump? You need to figure that one out too. That's another thing that you need to think about. How much water how many gallons per minute is that well going to put out? Okay, that will tell you how much you can put on your system. Don't plan, if you have a very low output, don't plan on having a high pressure shower in your house. But the low pressure showers work just fine. Okay, or heck, you could do the old fashioned bucket method and a sprinkle can. That's very low pressure too. But you need to figure out how much gallons per minute the water puts out before you start making grandiose plans of long lines. If it doesn't put out a lot of gallons per minute, you're not going to be able to pump water a very long distance across flat ground to water your gardens or to pump to tanks. If you're only doing this with no pumping system in it, then you have to figure about how much pressure you're going to have. The pressure would be considered or figured out by how much drop from where your well or your water source comes from to where the water is out. Basically, in really layman's terms, it's siphoning. Okay, it has to be able to flow. You need the gravity to get it from where your water's stored at to where you want to put your water at. Okay, that will depend on how much drop you have between point A to point B. That'll tell you how much pressure you have to get the water there. If you don't have pressure, you live in a very flat area, you're going to have a very hard time getting water in a hose by gravity feeding to any location without some kind of mechanical things. And then the next consideration is, of course, depending on your location, winter. If you're in the desert, you're not pretty much going to have to worry too much about freezing up. But if you're in a mountainous region, you're going to have to worry about that. Or here I am in South Arkansas thinking we're not going to have to worry about winter. 2 years ago, we had 3 foot of snow, and it stayed below freezing for over a week. Totally abnormal for this area, and totally messed up all our plans, but put us into the mindset of, okay, we need to consider it. This boils back to what I've been saying all the way along. Plan for the absolute worst and hope for the best. So now we plan for the worst. Yes, we had our entire system freeze up and shatter, and our totes, I think we had 6 of them at the time, free solid. Pretty awesome to sit there and look at. 6 times 3, 118 gallons of frozen water, and could do nothing with it. And it was like really fun. So that you need to consider. What are you going to do in your area that might possibly have a freeze up in the wintertime for water? Because even though it's frozen outside and you don't think you're thirsty and you don't have a garden out there, you're still going to have livestock that you're going to need to water if you have livestock. And you are still going to need water. Okay? The bare minimum a human needs a day for drinking and eating and general cleanup is about a gallon of water a day. Okay? There was 2 of us in our house, and we went about a week with frozen water. That's 14 gallons of water that we had to accumulate that we did by melting snow. And trust me, a 5-gallon bucket of snow packed solid does not make a lot of water. And it takes a lot of energy to melt that snow. So you need to plan for that. What are you going to do in a worst case scenario? You have a snowmageddon happen at your place, and you have yourself, your husband, 4 kids, and 200 head of livestock that you have to water. See, even when we had the snowmageddon, we had animals to feed and water. We had horses and rabbits and cows and goats and pigs. There was a lot of water that I was melting snow constantly. It was just unbelievable how amount of water. So in those instances, you could consider storing water, but that takes up a lot of area. And again, 1 gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. Where are you going to be able to store that much water? It's a lot of weight. Do you have a house big enough for that? But those are some of the issues that you need to consider with one of the more important things about on your farmstead, water. Without water, nothing else is going to exist. You can go with food almost 30 days, but without water, you'll be dead within 3 days. So next to air, water is one of the most important things that you need to make for sure that you have available on your farm. So while you're out there with your pen and paper, think about it. That's the other question that you need to put on the list. What's the rainfall in your area? What's the ability of water in your area? What are the laws for water catchment in your area? Is it illegal? Yes, there are some locations in the United States where it is totally illegal to catch any rainwater that falls on your property. The state considers it theirs. Absolutely makes no sense to me because God gave us water, but that's the way the government works. So look into the laws. Look into if you're in an area that might have zoning or HOAs, make for sure that they don't have any restrictions whatsoever on water catchment. Also, again, check into the regulations if they say that you have to be connected to the water system in your area, no matter how remote you are, and how much it's going to cost, and thousands of dollars to run piping out to your house. So there are a lot of considerations when it comes to this very important issue, water. That also may be the deal breaker of a piece of property that you've totally fallen in love with. But when you look into getting water, will there be a way that you can get water there? Are there going to be alternative methods that in case your already set up system fails? Are there alternative ways to provide water? Are there drilling companies that you could contact with to drill you a well? Or are you going to be able to drill your own well? Are you going to be able to set up the catchment systems back to the laws in your state? That even if you live in the boondocks and you don't have neighbors for a near square mile, there still may be laws that say you can't do it. Check into that. Check into if you're going to have the ability, meaning the physical energy, to maintain your own water supply. Because if you don't maintain it yourself and it breaks, guess whose it's on? You don't have a plumber to call. It's your fault that it broke because you didn't maintain it. So you have to have the physical capability and knowledge to be able to maintain even the most rudimentary Silver's trying to break in. Even the most rudimentary watering system on your property. Do you have the financial ability to supply the necessary equipment, infrastructure for that watering system? Do you have enough people that if you get sick, fall down, die, just get pregnant, can't do it, whatever, is there other people able to step in and know how to maintain the system? Or are you going to be the only one that's going to be able to maintain the system? Even in the most basics. Okay? And then, of course, the worst case, what's going to happen if something breaks? Or it snows and freezes up? Or we get a drought in the summertime and you go 6-8 weeks with no rain. So you need to look into all those questions and make for sure that you will have some kind of, it may not be concrete plans, but you need to have some kind of plan, some kind of idea of what you're going to do if you have a 6-week drought and you have a herd of livestock that you have to water in a garden that needs to be watered because you have to eat all that or you're not going to have food. How are you going to do it? Look into that. Pull out that pen and paper. Write down the questions. Make some calls. Google's your friend. Look online. You can find out a lot of information there. Ask around. Call people in the area. Go there. Visit. That would be also a smart thing to do. Visit your property once or twice every season and see what that piece of land is going to look like in those time frames. So you get a better idea in person without going by secondhand. But there you go. The watering systems for your family and your potential farm. Dream big. Keep your worries small. And if you like these videos, hit the like button and subscribe button and follow me, or whatever they call it, on whatever place that you find me. And I look forward to hearing from you in the comments section down below. If you have any questions, please ask. I would love to answer questions and talk to people who are exploring this new lifestyle because I adore it and I find it's the way that God meant that we should live. God bless one and all, and y'all have a blessed day.